Hey everybody, it's Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development here with Jeff Johnson. How are you this morning?
Very well, thanks.
Jeff, tell us about yourself and what you're doing now, the company you work for and what your role entails.
Cool. So I'm the Director of Education Consultancy at Cognition Education, which is one of the larger providers of professional development for teachers within New Zealand. Previously, I was different roles. I was a principal in a large primary school in Auckland for a number of years, and also was Director of Education at the Asia New Zealand Foundation as well for about 5 years before I started this role.
And that's where we met in Jakarta when you were bringing a cohort of teachers and educators over to Jakarta to get some intercultural, international collaboration working.
That's right. Yes.
And what do you think was the success of that project, and what do you think was not the success and could be improved in future, do you think?
Well, connecting teachers between cultures is an interesting prospect. Certainly, the face-to-face is an important part. It's you can only sort of take the relationships to a certain degree in this situation online. But spending time together, certainly homestay situations, and meeting people in their place is really important part of that process. That gives an opportunity to understand the other person's culture and the way things work for them, to break down those barriers and to actually form a friendship. And I think any relationships between schools, any situations of getting students to work together for any student trips and so forth, the basis of that to be sustainable and ongoing really is a relationship between the educators and the teachers involved. Ideally, the principals getting to know each other and meeting at some stage, but what's vitally important is the two key teachers involved really developing a friendship together, liking each other and wanting to support each other and work together, and really having an open mind about things that might be done differently in a different place, because that's the way things are done in their place as opposed to your place.
Right. And what role do you think leadership played in the success or lack of success in that project?
Yeah, I think certainly in most schools around the world, particularly in New Zealand, that nothing really happens in the school unless the principal's into it, and the principal thinks it's a good thing, and the principal gets a degree of passion about that particular thing happening. And that was certainly the case for these partnerships, and having the principals involved was a big driver for the success or not success of the programs. And particularly the opportunities where we're able to have the principal and the teacher together coming across and visiting and meeting the principal and the teacher as well, really opened up and gave the potential of the relationship much more right in front of that principal, and them being involved was a huge difference to the success going on. They then had an investment themselves and their time and doing the trip, but also investment with developing a relationship and a friendship with the principal that they were doing in the country they're going to. So that's that was hugely successful. And I think then being able to, back in their home country, being able to communicate the value of cross-cultural relationships, the values for the students themselves, and communicating that with the board, with the rest of the teachers and the staff involved that they're aware, and also with the community, so that everyone understands quite clearly from the school leader that the benefits of the relationship and the benefits, particularly to students.
That role of the leader adding her or his involvement, actual being a participant in a project to make it successful. Do you see that common, if we focus on New Zealand particularly, do you see leaders are participatory, they're fully involved, and does that work well in their instances where it doesn't work well?
Yeah, I think that's hugely important. I think the difference between a leader who gets caught up in administration, gets locked in their office, uh, gets concerned about the finances and the workings of the organisation, and it gets to a point where that overrides everything that they do, is detrimental, I think, to both themselves and the school. So leaders that step back from that to ensure that they put systems in place obviously are important, but they are actively involved and take a lead role as the instructional leader or curriculum leader for the school. Now that doesn't necessarily mean they have to do everything, but they take that role and take responsibility for what happens within classrooms, and whether they delegate that through other people within the school, but they take that lead concern that student achievement, learning and quality teaching is their most important role within the school, and that they, in addition to the administration side of things, that they see themselves as that instructional leader within the school.
So let's focus on that instructional leadership then in the school for someone who is a new principal, or for someone who wishes to create a shift in their organisation. What would you say would be a handful of first steps and focus areas and action points that a leader could do?
Yeah, well, particularly where you're coming new into the school, or even within a school that you're already at, I feel there's sort of a number of structures or frameworks or layers that you need to put into a school that sort of are interlinked and support each other to ensure that the school is working as well as it can. And in addition to that, that the focus on student achievement and student outcomes is paramount. And I think the real start to that is actually for that leader or the school leaders working with all the teachers within the school to take a step back and say, what is our purpose here? What are we about? And to work together with being led by obviously the school leader, but this process, but why do we exist as an institution or an organisation, and what are we about? And to develop, working with as a group, your vision for what your particular context demands and what you are all about. And then from that, determine, so how are we going to work together as a group? What is the things that we're going to work together, and what is it actually that we do? And really clarifying and crystallizing from the very start, this is what we're about, this is what we believe in, this is what drives us, this is our passion, and that's what we're all about. Now, coming out of that, once that's that common agreement, if you like, not just from the leadership, but something that all staff have had the opportunity to have their say about and be involved with and have buy-in into it, then from there you can then determine, well, what's our strategic direction from here? So this is what we believe in, this is our vision, then what are we going to do, broadly speaking, over the next 3 years? What comes out of that vision that are key things that we want to do? Now, the important thing there is to ensure that you avoid too much change, because sometimes if you try to do too much, you actually end up having a situation of not enough improvement. Right. If you try to do too much, then it actually can be counterproductive and everyone's sort of chasing their tails. So the important thing is really to look over, I would suggest, 3 key areas that you want to get involved in over a 3-year period. And one of those things might be actually something that you're already involved in. And you might stagger those things. So 1 year might be beginning something. In that same year, you might have another thing that you've been currently involved in. And the third thing might be something that actually finishing off. So that you're not trying to do too much, that you stagger those things and continually bring a new thing in each year and finishing things off as you go. So that you have your overall 3-year sort of, and some people go to 5 years, but I think 3 is probably achievable. And then out of that, you drop down, okay, what is this year about? What is our key thing that we're working on? And how are we going to work through that? Now, absolutely, the school leader needs to be driving that process. But I think they need to allow for teachers to have and teams of teachers to have a degree of autonomy in how that is achieved. So you have your agreement, what's our vision, what's our passion, how do we work together, what are we about? You know where you're going over the next 3 years, and you know really what you're focusing in that year going forward in particular. But then bring the teachers in, and you can determine how that's done, either through that another session to big bits of paper or whatever you want to do it. How can we achieve what we want to achieve? Can be done that way, or it may be actually giving each team a template that they fill out, that how they're going to improve in that particular area. So for instance, if maths was your focus, that you were concerned that school achievement of maths in certain areas was not where you wanted it to be, then you may allow the teams of teachers to gather the data first in their particular area, and then go through a process of looking at that and coming back to you with what they think would be key ideas within their team, within their particular year, of how they're going to achieve that. Have that discussion with you as being the instructional leader, and then determining what the course of action would be over the year. So you're allowing ownership over what they're going to do. They're not being told what to do, but you are heavily involved, and being involved, things need to be checked in with you for things to go ahead and for that to be done. And of course, having regular check-ins as to how that is progressing through the year. So I guess for that to happen, another key component within your school will be something that you need to be, which is really the person who determines the culture within the school, the institutional culture or school culture. And that is determined by a number of things. What you say and what you do as a school leader will greatly determine the culture that exists within your organisation. So the words that you use in emails, the way that you speak to your school, the way that you support and talk about your staff is hugely important, about how they'll feel about you and how they'll feel about working within their organisation. In addition to that, allowing having a culture that's safe for people to feed back to what's being talked about is really important. And I guess it's coming to a realization as a leader that you don't have all the answers, that you yourself only are limited by what you're aware of and what you do. And in fact, the strength of the school is the strength of the knowledge and understanding of every single staff member within the school. And for you to be able to say that actually to your staff and verbalize that to the staff and tell them that you want their input and you want them to contribute towards your vision and your goals. This is something that we're collectively doing, and that you value what they have to bring and what they have to say to things. Now, in my experience, that can happen. I always make it quite clear though to the staff, and I talk about that I have the principal's card in my back pocket. In other words, that they know at any point that I have the responsibility for the school, and at any point I can say, I appreciate your comment and I appreciate your ideas, but in this particular case, I'll have to bring out my principal's card because I need to make a decision about this and it rests on my head. And so I need to be, I hear what you're saying, but I think in this case, this is what we'll need to do. And I think as long as you've got that backup and clear understanding, you verbalize that, people will understand that in your role. And that allows you to ensure that things don't get out of hand.
Yeah.
That you have that ability to do that. But I found in my experience, if you are working under a vision and a passion together, it's actually very rare that I needed to bring out that so-called principal's card. That really, in reality, people want educators are there to make a difference. That's why they became educators. And that under good leadership, under a structure of a vision and strategic direction and what you're trying to achieve, and let's do that together in a culture that's open, people get excited about that and they want to do the right thing and they want to make a difference for students. That's why they've got into this game. So the culture is important, because if people feel that things are just done to them, often there will be a degree of resentment about that.
Right.
If they are given the opportunity to have their say about things, then there's a degree of excitement about that, and that's motivating people. Now, interesting enough, that's the direction that a lot of teachers are going with within schools in New Zealand, to allow a degree of autonomy with their students, that students can have ability to lead their own learning, that they can have some degree of choice around how they work within the classrooms and who they're working with and how they're achieving things. And that's the direction we're going. So I think that sort of is interesting, because that really reflects, I think, how highly successful schools can work, in that degree of giving a degree of autonomy and allowing teachers to have self-determining ways of working to a degree. Now, you as a person, and within your particular culture and where you work and your country and the way you do things, there'll be differences of how you do that and what's appropriate and what's not. I guess what I'm reflecting is, within the New Zealand context, what works best for us, and we tend to be quite casual in many ways, and principals will be called their first name by teachers, and we're quite relaxed about that in New Zealand. You'll have a different context, I'm sure, in Nepal, and the way that you do things, and I'm sure that you'll need to adapt things and do things that feels comfortable and appropriate and right in your particular context and situation.
Do you find, with your emphasis on getting that culture right, do you find that that's common, the pain point or the failure area where things are not right? Or where do you see there needs to be globally? Where are the pain points where things need to be improved from a leader's point of view in schools?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not just schools. I think it's in organisations generally. Leadership is about creating an environment where people are motivated and want to make a difference. Okay. And having not just worked in education but other situations, I see it in businesses and a whole range of things. So as a school leader, a key part of what you do is to ensure that you create a culture, environment, a situation where people are motivated, that will follow the lead, the vision of the place, and that feel really positive and excited about what's happening. And I've seen schools where there's been one principal who's had one approach, and then come another principal with another approach, both ways. It's been amazing to see same teachers, same kids, same community. The change has been the principal, and the effect of a new principal, whichever that way they go and the approach they take, has a huge impact on how people feel about themselves, but more importantly, it reflects actually down to student achievement. Right. Because it then the motivation, how people feel about it, people leaving or coming into the organisation, all that happening comes about how people feel about coming to work each day and the way that they feel. So I think that's quite a huge pain point, if you like, or huge determinant about the success of an organisation, success of a school, is to the approach and the way that the school leader creates, monitors, and feeds the culture of that organisation. And they shouldn't underestimate, as I said at the start, what they say and what they do can affect that. And they need ways of having safe people within the organisation that they can go to and check in with and say, right, hey, how did that go down, that last meeting? Do you think that I was okay with what I said? Often deputy principals or assistant principals, or even people, maybe just teachers within the organisation that they trust, to have a relationship with, just checking in and say, do you think that went down? And after a while, I think principals may even be comfortable just going, to a senior teacher and their group and saying, was that okay with you guys? And how do you think? Do you have any feedback on what we're trying to achieve here? And having that feedback and listening to that feedback and altering things or adjusting things, not only one will hopefully resolve whatever problem that is, but two, adds to the culture, because you're actually saying that you want feedback and you want to be, you want to know how people are feeling about it, because you care about what they feel about, and you want to make sure that we're doing the best, that we can. So, and I guess that means that you need to be a leader confident in yourself, but also be someone that is not arrogant, but is actually open to suggestions and is saying, okay, I don't need to have all the answers, but what I need to do is create the culture so that we collectively have all the answers. And I think that's an important part of it. So that's important. So, but culture isn't all of it. It's really important. And without it, I think the wheels can fall off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But you also need, as I talked about, the direction coming from the vision, coming from where you're going, that needs to be agreed. If you don't have your path going ahead, another pain point is obviously ensuring that the focus is on the right place. Student outcomes is hugely important. And so ensuring that you're getting the right data and having a proper process about that you're making about making a difference to students. So there's a real inquiry cycle around that. Sorry, Craig?
I was just going to say having that data is really important.
Yeah. So we talk about at Cognition sort of a process where you're really looking to find that information first. So gathering data and ensuring that data is relevant and giving you information that you need. Now the data can in some cases be obviously doing tests, and that's really important. One thing I've been looking through just recently, I just thought I'd share this book here by Russell Bishop about teaching to the Northeast. And he talks about relationship-based practice or relationship-based learning, I should say. So not only is it important to have the relationships with students, but it's also important to focus on the type of pedagogy or teaching that's going to make a difference. And that's that, not just, So both of those things are important. So in the relationships part of your data gathering, the work that we do with students with RBL, relationship-based learning, is actually to get student voice. In other words, allow for students to feedback about how they feel about learning in their classroom. Now that can be quite confronting for students, for teachers to get that feedback. And the safe environment for teachers is hugely important there. In New Zealand, we're actually quite a multicultural country, particularly in Auckland. We have our ethnic Maori community. We have quite a large Pacifica community from the Pacific Islands, but increasingly we have quite a large Asian community as well. In Auckland, in the next sort of 20 years, 1 in 3 Aucklanders is going to be of Asian descent. So for us, that student voice is quite important because the teacher can have bias unknowingly sometimes about students. And they may think because a student has brown skin that they may not achieve as good as other students. They may not realise they're doing it, but they may think because they're Maori, maybe they're from certain families, and so they may have these bias that they don't actually realise they have. And so to have student voice to come back and say, when I come into the classroom, I feel like I've got to put my culture to the side and learn a different way than what I'm comfortable with, or I feel like I don't get the same opportunities as other kids because of the colour of my skin, and things like that can be quite important and quite important data to have if you're going to shift kids with their achievement within schools. So there's different sorts of data that's important. Once you've got that data, then it's the ability to look at that and get collective thoughts on what can be done to make a difference. What changes need to happen? What needs to be designed? And probably in some cases, well, actually in many cases, what professional development, learning development does the teacher need to get to make changes that will meet those needs that are being found from that evaluation? And so a set of actions need to be determined. Again, these should be shared with the instructional leader of the school, and talked at a higher level to get agreement on. And so they've got awareness, not just awareness, but also know that they should then put resource into it. They understand that they need to pay money out of the school's fund to be able to support professional development needs to go on. And then from there, deliver whatever that plan is, both with professional development or with having those actions, the action plan put in place. And then check in points to see how that's going. And then being able to pivot if you need to, depending on what comes back. And then a summative assessments to be done to see how that's gone through, to then make decisions about the following year. So that we put that into an inquiry process. The evaluation happens at different points along the way, and that's really important to be able to evaluate as you go rather than just leave it to the end, because you may be going on something that actually isn't working so well, and it's important to check in on that journey. So I think that is really important. That's strong processes are put in. An inquiry is an important part of what goes on within the school. New Zealand curriculum calls it teaching as inquiry, and that's not to be confused, and sometimes that is confused with student inquiry, which is quite a different process. And
right.
So please don't get confused with that. That's about their students have their own inquiry, and there are different models for that. But we're just talking about teachers here and the processes that they need to go individually with their team, but also with the school as a whole, and linking back to school leadership.
That's really great, Jeff. I was going to ask you about your model, or a model that you would recommend using. That's really valuable. Thank you for that. I think the educators and the leaders will find it hugely helpful as new or experienced leaders. Just before we wrap up, we've got a couple of minutes left. Is there a project you've done or you're doing or is going to be started that you're really excited about, that sticks in your mind, that you could tell us about?
Yeah, well, I'm just, I showed you the book, and
yeah.
it's in my heart at the moment, because it's something within New Zealand. We've had we call it a long tail of underachievement for Maori and Pacifica people within New Zealand. And it's something that we haven't really been able to resolve in the last 20 years. It's something to be identified, but we're struggling with it. And I think what Russell has done, he did a whole big project over secondary schools, which was quite successful, called Teiko Tahitanga. And since then, we've worked with them to design an approach called relationship-based learning. It was actually in the last Education Gazette, if you saw it, with Home My School, Craig. But it's around getting that understanding from teachers. It's around that bias, actually, in many cases, that teachers actually unwittingly don't realise that when they see certain kids in their classroom, they act in a certain way or treat them a certain way to others. And often, they're good people with all the best intentions there to make a difference. And they just don't realise that they're doing this until they're confronted with it through the student voice. So that process is really important. And the relationships are important. Having an understanding about different cultures is important to a degree, and about having that cultural capability about different cultures. But I think what's been left off, and why we haven't achieved well, is what are the deliberate acts of teaching that need to go on to actually then take those kids somewhere else? What is the pedagogy? What is the teaching? What is the things that need to happen that will take those students somewhere else? So we've got quite a team now working throughout the country, and it's really starting to take off now. I'm very excited because we've got both schools, but also, quite importantly, clusters as well. We call them kariako, or communities of learning. And there'll be a range of schools that go from, in some cases, early childhood to primary to secondary, in some cases through to tertiary.
Wow.
And so we're able to work right across and manage those transitions as well between those different groups, and get everyone into that model. Now, that model involves us obviously being heavily involved in the start, but over time decreasing our involvement, because what we do is we get impact coaches, we call them, within the schools. And they then become the lead teachers who lead the learning and pick up from us and actually take the lead within the schools. So I think there's a mistake sometimes for professional development learning. There's cases where, you know, people come in, they do their stuff, and then they leave, and then things fall down again. And we're very conscious that we don't want that to happen, that we want people to be given the capacity within schools to lead the learning for the schools themselves. And so that's an important part of what we're doing. And the other thing that's we're just coming on board last year, we've got the rights for a video platform, a coaching platform called Iris Connect, and we're starting to blend that with our PLD as well, and that's quite exciting. And what that allows is for teachers to video themselves and their class, both the class and themselves. They have control of that video. They upload that to a platform, and then they can share it with mentors or share it with people that can give them feedback, or peers of feedback, and that's is quite powerful actually in people being able to improve their practice, because they see it, they think, oh, is that how many times I say or I didn't realize I was doing that, and then getting that feedback from people is, it's early days for us, but it's proven quite exciting already about the potential of that. So those are a couple of things that's going on in our space that we're quite excited about.
That sounds like something very powerful. I can imagine many schools or maybe particular countries getting all concerned about consent and privacy and issues like that. But I mean, the focus is improving practice, making an impact on learning, and helping students to continue that process of learning. Having that connection, I think, Jeff, between early childhood, primary, secondary, into tertiary education, so powerful as well, when we consider we can do fantastic in our elementary school, and then they might go on to a high school, which is a completely different, a misunderstanding and a disconnect between what they've just experienced, and then the shock and awe of something completely different where they can't have that student voice that you talk about. Powerful. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. The educators and leaders from Nepal will really get a lot from this. There is so much. I've got both sides of a page filled up with notes. I'm going to transcribe the key points and share it with the educators. Is there one final thought that you might leave with the educators and the leaders before we wrap up?
Well, my wife has a saying to me when I've had a tough day or got things on, and she just says, just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, Jeff. And I think you've got to look after yourself as a leader too, and you've got to make sure that family comes first, and you've got to make sure that you keep time for your family and for the people that are important in your life. And I enjoyed being a principal very much. It was full on at times, and there's some times where you just have to dig in and get stuff done, of course. But I think it's important that you enjoy the journey yourself as a school leader, and make sure that you look after yourself, and ensure that you give yourself and importantly the ones close to you that you love, ensure that you've got time for them too.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Right. Thanks, Craig.